So let's just talk about how the current lockdown situation and COVID-19 has really impacted how we deliver therapy for you as a therapist.
I think it just meant that we have to be more creative, I think, and adapt the way that we've worked. I know that I have done most of my work up until now has generally been face-to-face. And I think it's really important in the fact that it's just not doable with social distancing. We're having to find other ways to, I guess, deliver a service, because a service is still needed, and particularly at the moment, some people's mental health, they're really struggling. So for me, it's just been about adapting the way that I work, trying to offer an online service through using Zoom, which is seems to be the most the safest form of video conferencing that we can use to deliver the service as safely as we can to the client, so that people still have an opportunity to talk about any anxieties or any things that might be going on for them that they still feel that they really want to discuss, really. So for me, it's been about finding a way to support them to still access the service in a way that feels safe and doable.
Mm-hmm. And I know we're used to working online through video conferencing. Sometimes we have clients who can't physically make it to the office, or working with clients abroad sometimes. So it's not a new thing for us as therapists to bring our practice online. And I wonder, what would you want someone to know that had never been in therapy before about coming and working with you online?
I guess what feels important is that I guess they know how the process works. So I guess for starters, if someone's never thought about accessing therapy online, or it's not the most popular way I think people think initially about accessing therapy, I guess it's about letting them know how they access the service. So for me, if someone contacts me and is inquiring about online therapy and accessing the service, it's about guiding them through what that might look like. So for example, to begin with, I offer them an invite to join the software that we're using, which is Zoom. And I do this either via email, is usually the most effective way for me to do it. And I have been sending them that link about 5 or 10 minutes before our session is due to start. But I guess for some people, this is new. It's a new way of dealing with things. And for those who maybe have never used it before, then I'm more than happy to talk them through it beforehand. And if they're struggling, I'm happy, for our first session to talk them through the process. Because what usually requires is for them to have downloaded the app before the session starts.
How do we maintain effectiveness of the therapeutic relationship when we work online?
I think what's really important is when you go and see a therapist, the room and the environment is kind of protected by the therapist, by the room or the session that you have gone to. So if you go to a therapy centre, you're not distracted. You're there just to see your therapist. There's nothing else really that can interrupt, I guess, the sessions. But I think when you're conducting, if you're in your home environment or you're in your work environment and you're accessing therapy, it's really important that you can take control of your environment, so that you find a quiet place in your house where you're not going to be disturbed. If you're worried about being overheard or anything like that, sometimes I suggest that clients use headphones so that they can engage in a conversation that way. And I think it's really important that you think about where you are, because if you're fearing about being overheard, then you're less likely to be able to feel relaxed and comfortable in opening up to your therapist. And that's what's really important. For you to get the most out of your therapy session, you need to feel free to speak openly with the therapist. And so it's really important, I think, when clients are accessing therapy online, that they need to think about their environment. And as a therapist, I need them to take more responsibility for that, because I can't control the environment that they're in.
What are some of the differences you think that you've come across working face-to-face as opposed to working via something like Zoom or video conferencing?
I guess for me, the kind of service I offer is still the same. I know that I have had people who maybe haven't been able to control their environment, and people have either walked into the room or they've been in their office and they've been distracted by other things going on, and so I can tell that almost there's a break in the process that we might be working in. And so I guess for me as a therapist, it makes it hard to maybe follow something through, and it makes it a little bit less efficient, I think, and a bit more disjointed, and it can be quite difficult. So I guess that's probably one of the main things that I have noticed when I have been working with people online, is I've not been able to provide a safe environment, I guess, for that to take place. And of course, there's always internet connection. Sometimes it can be difficult if the connection drops. There have been times where it's been a bit, that connection or that flow of the session has been disrupted. But that generally hasn't happened too often. But I think it's the things that distract from kind of the relationship and what's going on between the therapist and the client.
And I think it's important that we acknowledge some of these differences. So some of the things I've found is, taking that as an example, is making sure that we have a contract with the person that we're working with. Say if, for example, working on Zoom and that stops working, that we have a backup video conferencing facility that we can move to. And then after that, the telephone. So we're always able to have that conversation securely with the person we're working with. I think as well that maybe some of the things that we've demonstrated is it's just a little bit more difficult to know when to take turns in the conversation. Because and there's just an ever so slight delay, and you can't see everyone's body language. So you kind of, right, it's my turn to talk. Oh no, you haven't finished yet. So some of those things we need to account for, and also the eye contact. That although I know we're looking at each other, but we're not. We're doing it from slightly lowered elevation to where the camera is. So it can feel that. I think we're all probably used to this by now because we're used to being on Zoom. But sometimes not having that eye contact can feel a little bit strange in a therapy session. So, but I think for me that when we make these things clear and explicit, that it's not an issue, that we can compensate and overcome any of the real kind of minor issues that we come across using video conferencing. And I don't know how have you found it to be as effective as face to face?
I think it's a difficult one. I don't think it's not effective. I think as a therapist, my personal preference would always be probably to see somebody face to face. And I think there are less obstacles to get over. I think sometimes when you can see people face to face, but I don't necessarily think that the conversations and the what we can work through necessarily online is any different. Sometimes it might take a bit longer, and I think particularly if you're seeing new clients, I think doing that on Zoom, for me, it feels like it may be taking a little bit longer to develop that therapeutic relationship, because it's not such a personal process, I guess. You are talking over through a computer screen, and for me, that does maybe delay a little bit the relationship and the therapeutic connection that you might develop with somebody. But I don't think that impacts the ability to develop that therapeutic relationship. And I definitely think that, from new clients that I've got, I've still been able to work really effectively with them, and they've got a lot out of the sessions that we have had together.
I think what I've found is when I've been working with people face to face, and because of when the lockdowns happened, we've moved to video conferencing. People had an initial reluctance to work online, but once they did do that, they found it to be really effective for them.
I think sometimes it's that newness, and I think initially, because of the nature of lockdown, I think lots of people were just in a state of, we'll just press pause on everything. And it was just kind of it was a shock to everybody. I think everyone kind of went into survival of just get through each day as it is. But then I think people are beginning to realize that actually their life still needs to continue, and they still need to access support, and the support is still there for them, and it still is available. And I think it's just about being open to maybe accessing that support in a different way. And I think we're going to be looking at accessing a lot of the support and a lot of the work and help that we get is going to be through video conferencing for a while, just with the nature of where we are with COVID-19. And I think it's important that people know that the support is still there, it's still accessible, it's still as effective, and that they just need to know where to look for it and how to gain access to it. And I guess what that might look like.
How do you think people are being impacted now by the lockdown, and what's being termed as social distancing? I prefer to use the word physical distancing because it's more accurate. Actually, we're not socially distancing ourselves from people, are we? We're in some ways becoming more social. We're really feeling that need to connect with people. And I wonder how you find people are being impacted by this new norm that we've established, and maybe how psychotherapy could benefit with that.
I think initially, everyone kind of almost went pause. My experience was, when it first started, some of my clients, I guess, stopped or they pressed pause on the process because I guess they were trying to see how everything was all going to pan out. I guess, like we all were. Suddenly overnight, our lives were kind of turned upside down and our norm was being forced to change. And I think what I'm starting to feel now is that actually people are starting to, I guess in a way, settle into the new norm, and that actually they still want and need to access the support. And so almost people have kind of gone into hibernation, but now they're starting to come back out again and access things and realize that things still are available to them. And actually they still want to access them. I almost think that the initial shock of what's happened to people has kind of calmed down a little bit, and people are starting to almost adapt into what we would now call their new norm and their new reality. And I think there's probably a real understanding now that actually this is going to be here for a while. This social distancing, it's not going to, it's not going to stop overnight. And actually, we're not going to go back to life how it was before. It's going to be new. It's going to be different. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty about that. We don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know when it's going to happen. And I think people are probably, from my experience, people feel like they're on a little bit of a roller coaster with it. Some days they're managing okay and it feels all right and it's fine. And other days it's harder. The not knowing what it's going to be like, when they're going to next be able to physically see family and friends other than through, Zoom. I think it's hard. And I think particularly the support that you can get through accessing therapy can really help benefit, kind of talk through this hardness. And, it is hard. And I think it's about accepting that actually it is hard and it's okay to be hard.
How do you think we can help people establish the new norm and work through that?
I think it's almost about accepting the new norm. There's a resistance to not wanting things to change or wanting things to be how they were before. And I guess, our reality is we're not looking at that. I think it's going to be a long time before we are able to be, I don't know, maybe have the social freedom that we had before, where we're able to travel and see people. And I think it's about, I guess, supporting people to give them permission to find it hard for it to be hard, to find it hard not to be able to see their loved ones, their family, and that, and it's almost normal to feel a bit worried about what everything's going to look like when our children might go back to school or when we might be able to go back to work, or, I think people are worried about their financial situation. And I think all of these are perfectly acceptable and normal things to feel at the moment. And I guess some of it's really hard because we don't have any control over some of that. And I think what's really important when there is so much that we have little control over is to acknowledge the stuff that we do have some control over, and to focus on what we can do and how we can look after ourselves. And we might not be able to visit family or friends, but actually if we need that connection, it's supporting people to identify, well, actually you can still have a connection, and it's finding the right way for them to engage in that connection.
I think that's a wonderful point to be made, that the difference between the tension comes for people when there's a disparity between what's actually going on one hand and what they want to happen, and the two aren't meeting up. And I think people feel disempowered that they can impact that on a level. And like you said, there's always something we can do to change, to take control of, even if it's what we're paying attention to and where our focus is. If we're focusing on the things that we can't change, it's going to cause us tension and anxiety. And we might find ourselves dwelling on things and worrying about things and not being able to sleep. But actually, if we shift our focus onto the things we can change, maybe how do we make connections with people in a new way? What can I take control over in my house? How can I move forward with things? And it is difficult, isn't it? And I think there's a lot at the moment going about where there's a bit of a narrative going around, well, you've got all this time off now. People have all this time off now to do what they want, and I can learn a new language, we can get fit, and you can do all this. And the reality is, we're at home, we're parenting. We're having to run a house. We're having to kind of, all of these things that are just as time consuming as what were, or we're trying to balance working from home with having family at home. And that's really, really difficult. And I think people are experiencing now that kind of expectation that they should be working at home as effectively as if they were in the office. And of course, if you've got, you're at home, you've got kids running around, and all those boundaries are being transcended into your home life, and it's really difficult. So I wonder, do you have any kind of advice onto how to manage expectations and establishing this new norm?
I think, like you said, I think that for some people, there feels like an awful lot of pressure, in terms of, if you are, are a family, and you are a working parent and you are trying to work from home, and yet you've got kids that are also supposedly needing to be homeschooled, and equally you still have a house to run. There are still things that need doing in the house. And I think, what's really important is to acknowledge actually what can you do, other than trying to fit in to be the, do all what you did before and everything else. I guess it's acknowledging, what's realistic? What is realistic for me? The school have sent home 10 different things for us to do today. Is that realistic? And it's all very well, that might be what they achieve in the classroom, but actually you're not a qualified teacher, and you don't have, you maybe have other siblings in the house, or you have other things in the house that kind of take your demands or are demanding of your time. And I think sometimes what's really important is actually, this is hard for everybody, and it's new for everybody. And I think what's really important is actually, there's a little part of you that I think has to be selfish. We all have to survive this in any way that we can, in that extent, in terms of looking after ourselves, whether that's physically, mentally. And so I think, if you can fit in 2 hours of homeschooling, then brilliant. Do those 2 hours of homeschooling, and then, almost have a structure to your day that feels manageable, as opposed to trying to be everything for your work, your kids, your family, yourself, I guess, in terms of, learning new things. My reality is I'm at home with kids. I'm still trying to work, and I'm trying to homeschool. And I have a child that's not at school yet. So trying to homeschool and manage a child who's, not yet it's hard. It's difficult. So I guess over time we've adapted our working day, so to speak, to fit in with our routine. And I think it's about almost being really, I won't say the word selfish, but thinking about your family unit. If you are part of a family, what is going to work for you? And what might work for you might not work for your friend down the road. And I think it's important not to compare ourselves with what everybody else is doing. I think do what feels right for you and do what works for you, because this isn't normal.
No. And I think sometimes just you need to give yourself permission to go, you know what, I need to just take care of myself a little bit now. And that often feels selfish to people. But it's that notion of if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of other people in our life. And I think that's especially so now. Now, if we're not looking after ourselves, it's harder to look after our kids. And it's important. And at a time where we probably lack resources that we would normally have, people don't have the family and friends that they can turn to at the moment. Sometimes their children aren't necessarily going to school or nurseries. So all of those resources that can just help us have that time to ourselves to recharge our batteries aren't there for us, and we're kind of it's a bit more intense, I think, for people. If you had 3 top tips for someone to get through the lockdown period, what do you think would be most helpful?
Okay, so what I think is structure. I think structure is really, really important, and that can be as flexible, I guess, and I know that sounds, or it can be as structured as you like it, but I think, definitely trying to get up at the similar time every day, and, have your meals at similar times every day. And I guess it is about being flexible with that to a certain extent, but I think having almost things to kind of tick off throughout the day. Some of us are actually busier than we've ever been, because we are working and we are looking after kids. Some people, are less busy than they've ever been. Maybe they're no longer working, they're no longer able to work. So I think it is about whatever situation you are in, is finding some structure and some routine to your day. I think that's really important. Secondly, I would probably, I guess it is finding, actually, what do I need? Asking yourself, what do you need? And even if that thing is something different every single day, maybe that notion of having that question with yourself in the morning, what do I need from today? Yeah. So maybe that is, I need to go for a walk, I need an hour off, I want to go out, or actually I need contact with somebody, I need to phone, I need to have contact with my friend today, or I need to arrange a Skype call with some family members later. I guess it's checking in with yourself. What do I need today?
Yeah.
And make space for that. I guess a third one I would want to say, I want to give permission to people to feel okay with how they feel and to want what they want.
Yeah, that's really important.
If you want to reach out and contact loads of different friends and have lots of social interaction via house party or Skype or Zoom or however you want it, brilliant, go and seek that out. If you actually are quite happy in your family unit and actually your life is much busier now because you are working at home and you're homeschooling and you're looking after your family, and actually it gets to 7 o'clock at night and actually you just want to collapse in front of the telly and read a book, that's absolutely okay too. And I think it's about remembering that, maybe what we want is absolutely okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what other people want. And I guess have that check-in and make it okay to want what you want.
What would you like someone to know about psychotherapy and how that could help them through this period, through the lockdown? Because people are struggling with time and finances, so it's a big commitment for someone to come into therapy at the moment, and we appreciate that as therapists. So what would you say that psychotherapy would add to someone's life at this time?
I think it gives kind of an open space for people to actually come and talk about some of their fears and some of their worries. And sometimes talking to someone who isn't a friend or isn't a family member and someone who might not have an opinion as such on the situation can really help someone kind of help to understand their position a little bit better. And and understand themselves, and I guess support people to acknowledge what they can do, in that essence of looking after themselves, as opposed to focusing on some of the things that they can't do, i.e., that maybe worrying about the financial pressures or things that I guess that are out of control. I guess it's about supporting people to understand themselves better, so that they are able to support themselves better from a psychological point of view. I guess to manage and maneuver these difficult times.
So I've worked a lot with people who have quite a lot of expectations about themselves around how they should manage, or how they should be in this lockdown. There's a lot of pressure on people. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that, on maybe managing that.
I guess what feels really important to acknowledge that actually there is no right way to manage any of this. None of us were prepared for it. None of us knew it was coming. So I guess it's really important. There's no right way or wrong way in terms of how people choose to manage, how they're going to maneuver through these difficult times. But I think what also feels really important is that we acknowledge that actually the majority of us, I think, are on a little bit of a roller coaster with this. I think some days it feels absolutely fine, and actually you can forget about almost the hideous reasons, why we are currently in this situation and why we are stuck at home, and not being able, have limited movements and not being able to see each other. But I think other days, it's not uncommon, and don't be surprised if actually some days you find it really difficult, because I think it is a bit of an emotional roller coaster in that sense of, we're developing a new norm, and as that becomes more normal for us, it's like that pattern. It's what we get used to. It's like a habit. This is what we do now. I know in our house we have a routine now for what homeschooling and what work looks like. But that's not to say, and we fall into that, and there can be some comfort in the familiarity of that. But also there's always that realization that actually the reason why we're in this situation, it is unpleasant, and it's not great. And I think it would almost not be kind of, what's the right word? It would be surprising if some people didn't have good days and bad days. I think we need to face the reality that actually there are going to be good days and there are going to be bad days. And if you're having a bad day, that's absolutely okay. Like, this is not a pleasant situation for us to be in, and I think it's remembering that, particularly on those bad days, to focus on the things that you need. We've talked about attending to your needs, but on the days that you are really struggling and having a bad day, it might be, okay, what do I need right now? Do I actually need to go for a walk? Do I need some time out? Do I need to speak to a friend and just say, do you know what, I'm struggling, because it's okay to find this hard.
Yeah. So due to the coronavirus and the lockdown that's in place, we've adapted our service, and we've decided to offer a very short 4-block a block of appointments for people focusing on anxiety. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit about what that would look like for someone who comes, and what some things they might be anxious about.
Okay, well, I think it's really important. I think as a centre we've identified that, it's difficult times for people. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, and lives as we knew it have been turned upside down. And, they aren't going to be, life as we knew it before isn't going to go back to normal, so to speak. It is going to be different. And I guess in these current times, there are lots of worries, I think, that people have at the moment, whether it's people worrying about financial pressures, or people might be struggling with relationships. I mean, we are stuck in a house, with our family, our partner, and that's not that our husbands, it's not like it's not normal for us, and I think the tensions and pressures within that environment can be really challenging. And I think there's going to be people who are going to be worried about their jobs, about work, about family members. Maybe they have elderly relatives that they can't support or they can't see. And I guess it's just about identifying that actually this is hard and this is really difficult. And it's okay to find it hard and it's okay to find it difficult. But I think what's really important is that, as a nation, that we don't, what's the right word? That we don't build it up into an anxiety, I guess, condition where actually we're all suffering really badly with anxiety. And I think it's really important that we, as a, I guess that support is available for people that are starting to feel anxious, and that people know that actually they don't have to live with the anxiety, and that there are things that, tools and techniques that people can use to help kind of reduce that sense of anxiety so that we can still function, so that we can still get through day to day without maybe anxiety impacting us. And I think what's really important is that, yes, we are currently all quite restricted on our movements. That's become our new norm. We're not going back out. We're not going and seeing our friends. We're not being in busy environments. And actually, at some point, those restrictions will be lifted. What they look like, we don't know yet. But actually, that's going to be new for us again. We're going to have to adapt to being surrounded by people, and our children are going to have to adapt to being back in that environment. So I think it's important that we acknowledge anxiety, we acknowledge that it's there, and that we don't ignore it actually, and that almost that we attend to it and support people to kind of stop it from impacting them so that they're not able to function on a day-to-day basis.
So if someone did book for a block of appointments to talk about anxiety, what could they expect?
I guess, first of all, from my point of view, I guess it's about, well, what are they worried about? What is triggering their anxiety? And I think there are so many different things out there that might be someone's trigger, that each person is unique, each person is different. And it's about, as a therapist, I want them to come to me and say, do you know what, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I'm worried about, whether it might be family, friends, finances, life after, COVID, what's it going to look like, when am I going to be able to visit my parents or family members. I guess it's, I want to know what they're worried about, so that I can help support themselves to deal with that.
So once their worries have been identified and their fears have been identified, how would we work with that?
Almost it's important to give permission for them to be there, but almost acknowledge them and acknowledge what can be done and what can't be done. I guess it's, we all have fears about it because we don't know what's going to happen. And I think in this situation, it's normal for us to have worries and fears about some of this stuff. And that absolutely is okay. But I guess, it's about identifying, so what things can we do? And actually not investing so much time in worrying about the things that actually we don't actually have much control over.
What would you, if there was one thing you'd want someone to go away with, one message or one experience having booked a block of sessions with you, what would it be?
I think particularly around anxiety, I think anxiety it's a really normal emotional response to have. And actually the notion of anxiety is designed to kind of protect ourselves. It's kind of our early warning system saying, hang on, there's something doesn't feel right here. And this isn't the norm. And it's like that alert, to say, hang on, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel comfortable. And I think it's really important that's a really important system for us all to have, and at the moment, that's exactly what's happening. Our anxiety system should have kicked in. This is not normal, and that's absolutely okay. But I guess it's about identifying that actually the experience of anxiety is a normal experience to have, but it's what we then do with that experience that is the difference between it impacting us to a point that we kind of spiral into a panic attack or a really deep anxiety anxious state, or we acknowledge the anxiety, we give it permission, we see it for what it is, and we choose to do something different with it.
So I know we've talked a lot about the change in society at the moment and how important it is for us as therapists to adapt to people's needs. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what that's looked like for us, for our centre, and what we offer people.
Yeah, I think as a centre, I think we're very aware that actually at the moment people are struggling. You know, this is a big change for everybody, and that lots of people are dealing with different challenges on a day-to-day basis in different areas of their lives. And I think we are aware that, you know, sometimes access to therapy, it can feel like a big financial commitment. And at the moment, people haven't necessarily got that financial stability, or they're feeling a little bit apprehensive about their financial stability because we don't know what's going to happen. So I think, you know, we put together these 4 sessions to kind of support people that maybe feel like they might benefit from a little bit of support from a therapist, and maybe might not feel able to commit to a long-term process, but actually, you know, understand that maybe investing, you know, this, you know, in these 4 sessions might actually have a real, you know, positive impact on them, you know, throughout you know, the rest of this situation. So I think we wanted to put something together that felt accessible, that didn't feel like too much of a financial burden for people, because I guess, you know, as therapists, we do the job because we care about people. You know, we want to support people, we want to help people. And so this particular package, I guess, we put together to kind of say, well, look, we're here. We hear you. We know people are struggling. But, you know, here is some, you know, access to some support. Yes, it may only be, you know, short term, but actually you can gain a lot from these sessions. And, you know, we feel that it's at a reasonable, I guess, price to support people with that.